Okay, I'm going to take you through the steps to make your cover for your Checking It Twice mini album. These are my covers and they are finished, so I'm going to use a different decorative paper. I'm making another one. So let's get started on that. The first thing you're going to need, I'm just going to use a piece of black cardstock so you can see this better, is a piece of decorative paper. You'll need two pieces that are 7 3/4 inches by 8 1/4 inches, and then you'll need two pieces that are 5 1/2 inches by 6 inches, and then you'll need two pieces of chipboard to be 5 3/4 inches by 6 1/4 inches. Okay, now what I've done on my paper is I've marked right here, you have an extra 1 inch all the way around where your chipboard will sit. I marked a 1 inch corner on each of these so that when I get my adhesive on, I can just set it right down and I'll have a perfect placement on there. So let's go ahead and put our decorative paper on our chipboard. I'm using my ATG. You can use any type of adhesive you're used to using on this. And I apologize ahead of time if you hear some squeaking out of my ATG. I'm not exactly sure why that's doing that. Okay, there we go. Now what I like to do is turn it over and use my bone folder and really burnish that adhesive to the chipboard and the paper. There we go. Now your next step is you're going to need to cut your corners out so it lays properly. How far away it is from this corner on the chipboard depends on how thick your chipboard is. Mine's pretty thin, so I'm going to go less than 1/8 of an inch, and I just eyeball it. And I cut all 4 corners off. Okay. Now I learned this from Laura Dennison and it really works very well. She said following the paper trail. I'm just going to go ahead and bend this like this to get my folds started, and then I can finish them with my fingers. You really don't need to use a bone folder on this because you're going to be applying adhesive. And I do one side at a time. Okay, that's step 1 for your cover. Step 2 is to adhere the inside decorative paper. Now this is a pretty tight fit. You only have about 1/8 of an inch all the way around, and I did that on purpose because when you do your binding, this edge right here will also get bound and it'll look nice and neat. So let me apply some adhesive to this. Now I want you to get really close with your adhesive on the edge here so you don't have any loose edges. And then I always do a cross hatch on mine. There we go. Let's adhere that down. And there's one of my covers. Okay, I'm going to take you through the binding for your mini album. This is the back cover of my mini album, and as you can see, I used to bind it all. Your other option is to use book rings. These are the book rings, and I got these 10 for $1 at the dollar store, and I always cover them with pretty ribbons, so they work quite well. These are an inside diameter of 1 inch. Before I move on to the Bind It All binding, I wanted to give some information to those using the 3 rings. This is your cover. It's 6 1/4 inches long. I'm just going to turn it sideways so it's a little bit easier for me. I would measure in to the halfway mark at 3 1/8 inches, and I would actually make one of these templates with the measurements I gave you. It's 1 inch wide and 5 1/2 inches long. These holes are 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And I would actually mark your halfway mark and then just lay your template right on top and mark your holes, and you can center it so that you get an exact placement on your 3 holes for your binding. Keeping in mind that this half of this white will actually be inside your pocket pages, so that should give you a pretty accurate setup for your 3-ring binding. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how to do the binding on this, and let me explain something to you. I hope you can see this okay. The right edge of this hole is a 1/2 inch from the edge of the cover. This hole is the same way. The left edge is a 1/2 inch from the edge of this cover. Measure up from your binding edge about 1.5 inches. This is the depth right here of your Bind It All machine. So, and then you need to measure in a 1/2 inch from this edge right here over, and that's where your first hole is going to line up. The hole I'm talking about is right here, the far right side of the first hole. That will line up with that mark, not this groove, the right hand side of this first hole. When you have that aligned, go ahead and punch your holes. Okay, and there you have 6 holes. Now I want you to push this forward so you have a guide, and I want you to come into the 4th hole and put it on the guide. Sorry, this is a little unusual. I'm doing this at a side angle. Okay. And there we have our holes completed for our cover for our mini album. This is just a simple cutting diagram I made for you to demonstrate how I saved cardstock with very little waste. These are the pieces you'll need for each pocket page for your Checking It Twice mini album. This is the pocket page back. It's 6 inches by 6.5 inches. This is the pocket page front. It's 6 inches by 5 inches. This is 2 binding pieces. This is actually an extra one you can use on your next page. These are each 2 inches by 5.5 inches. This is the only waste in the page. And this is what it will look like when it's all cut. You have the main pocket back, main pocket front. This is waste. And you have 2 pieces of binding material. These are 2 by 5.5. Only cut 3 of your 8.5 by 11 pieces of cardstock like this. The other 3 pieces, you can just leave this piece whole and put it in your scraps bin to use for something else. You don't need those 3 pieces. Let's get started on the pocket pages for the Checking It Twice mini album. Right now we're going to work on this binding piece. It's very simple. You just need to make a fold at the 1 inch mark. I have this marked in white so you can see it. You need to fold it in half and make sure you've got it scored really well on that fold. Then you need to run your adhesive down the outside edge. And now you're ready to make a decision whether you want to use a Bind It All, or if you want to use 3 book rings. This is the template I made to, it's the same size as your binding piece. This half will be inside your pocket page. So I came over, the center of these holes is 3/4 of an inch down, 3/4 of an inch up, 1/4 of an inch in, and then this middle one is split in the middle at 2 3/4 inches. And these rings fit very well through this hole. These holes were made, this is a large hole in my Crop-A-Dile. So that'll give you 3 rings on your binding. Okay, I've chosen to use the Zutter Bind It All on my binding because it's new and I want to learn how to use it. What you want to do is the folded half of this needs to go down in your Bind It All. So I'll show you how I'm going to do this. The left hand side needs to go line up with this arrow right here. And punch. Flip it this way bring your, oh, sorry, your guide up. You want to put it in the second hole. And punch. Bring it over to the next to the last hole. And punch one final time. Okay, our next step is to put our main pocket together. So right now we're going to work with the back main pocket piece, and that piece is 6.5 inches wide by 6 inches long. I want you to rotate it this direction, and then we're going to start scoring it. You need to score it at a 1/2 inch here, a 1/2 inch here. This is the 6-inch width. I want you to rotate it and score one end at a 1/2 inch. Now before you start folding, I want to show you something. In order for these to fold in and lay properly, you need to cut these corners out. You can cut it square, but it's going to show, so I just kind of little bit both directions just so it closes properly. Okay, so first I'm going to turn this piece up, make sure it's scored very well, and then both sides. These are your connectors for your two halves on your pocket. Now the first thing you need to do is take this piece and you need to center it on this. Okay? It's actually 3/16 of an inch up from the corner, and you need to line it up with the edge like this. We're going to center it between the two ends. Now keep in mind we've cut this in, so we need to use this corner, not this top edge here. So let's go ahead and get some adhesive on this. Okay. You're going to center it on this. Okay, I need to pick this up because I can't see it very well. There we go. Now when you flip that over, this is going to be hidden inside your seam. Okay? And the next step is to put our pocket front on. Okay, the next piece is our pocket front, and this is 5 inches by 6 inches. Okay? And this is going to fit right on top of this. So the first thing we need to do is run our adhesive. I'm going to run my sides first, and I'll show you in a minute why. Make sure you get adhesive all the way to the top. Okay, now I can just stick this bottom right like this. Don't forget to add adhesive to the bottom. And then I start on this corner here and line my cardstock up. And there you have your completed pocket.